Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another new Let's Play style thing. This is going to be called Operation from Scratch. Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Makari. This is a new project we've put underway. We have Twitch chat with us today. We have actual mod following. Welcome to the stream, actual mod. I appreciate that. Joining us today. Now, you might be asking, what is Operation from Scratch? Operation from Scratch is the endeavor to re-experience what Warframe is. 2 years ago, I started playing Warframe for the shits and giggles of a YouTube video. Now, back then I did it literally just because I wanted the top hat for Limbo. We've been playing the game solidly for 2 years. I would like to consider myself a veteran at this game now. Pretty self-entitled if I do say so myself. But what we want to do now, we've gotten to the point where most content we've done, we've experienced the game to a point where we can do near enough everything, we know what mods are, everything of that nature, we know how to do almost everything in the game. So, what I want to do, to try and dynamify our content, we are going back to the very start of the game. And we're going to experience Warframe as a new player with a veteran's perspective. And we're going to be analysing this, we're going to be discussing it with chat, where you can discuss it in the comments. And we're going to find out what works for the tutorial, what works for a new player, and we're going to figure out what is good in the hood, son. So we're going to be really encouraging critical talk, we're going to be encouraging dynamic talk, anything that you can think about the beginning of Warframe, and anything that we're talking about in this specific episode that's relevant to what we're doing. This will probably last a few episodes, and it'll be nice to go back to re-experience what we did originally, because think about it, if you go back to the very start of this playlist, for the Warframe playlist on my YouTube, there is a night and day difference to how I play now by comparison to back then. There's a lot more understanding as to how the game works, and the game itself is so much different to what it used to be. What you'll potentially see as well is this is actually the second time we've started this now. We didn't really record the first time we did this, and I thought it'll be a good content start for us to do it like this. So, without any further ado, we let the chat decide on the name for this one. So this will be, the character for this is going to be called Buggo. So let's get in and get on with it. So we are literally going from the word go. So we're going to start up with the cinematic scene. Now this first cinematic scene, I think it was a great way to introduce players to the cinematic type of game that this is. There's a little lack. There is a bit of a lack of like explanation going on here, but I think from a visual perspective, it's a really good way to dump yourself into the world. I still remember this. This is such a lovely intro. Something I think that would have been really nice here would be maybe an explanation, more of an explanation other than this guy's an asshole as to why they don't like each other. I mean, obviously it's not really necessary. I understand that. But maybe, for the sake of somebody who's new to the game, or who has no idea about the Warframe universe, having something to quickly explain what the Grineer are, or like just a little thing saying Grineer, like how you introduce a character, for example. And I get that there is meant to be a bit of playfulness with this because you're not expected to know what the Grineer are, or you're not expected to know the story of Warframe unless you read up on it. And we'll get to more of that later, but this is something I was never quite unsure about. They start off talking in Grineer, and then they just quickly jump to English. Or sorry, like common speak. And that was always something that really baffled me. It was very weird that they started with one thing but went to another. I guess it was like the universal translator, but it's never really explained. And I think a lot of what Warframe misses at the start for a new player is explanation. Alright, so we have our this is the first big choice any Warframe player would have to make at the start of their Warframe experience, and that is choosing your frame. Now, originally when I first got into Warframe, there was the choice of Loki in here as well. I kind of like the fact they got rid of him in place of another, because Loki, although he was a very nice frame to play, he had a very specific play style. He didn't really give he had one sort of main role to be a stealthy frame, and that's great and everything, but he doesn't give a good example as to the dynamic playstyle of different types of frames. The different types of frames being obviously your melee heavy ones, the ones that scale from different weapon types. You got the ones that sort of scale more towards from their ability power and how you mod them individually. And Loki wasn't really either. He had no abilities that were really offensive. He was very specifically tailored towards being stealthy, which is fine. He's a lovely frame to play, but he wasn't really one that would really introduce a new player very well to Warframe, I feel. So, we're going to get into this. We chose Excalibur first time through. For the sake of continuity, the other character we have ready for when we get back to where we were originally with Operation from Scratch was Volt. So we're going to stick with Volt for the time being. Just to give a bit of a summary, the frames you start with, they're there to teach you individually what the type of frames you can play in Warframe are. And I like the fact that they do give you a pretty good synopsis of what each individual character brings. Something that I think would work really well for a new player, because this is just a little comfort of life thing, I feel. But having an option every time you discover something new, to go to your codex to explain what the frame is. Like, because some people love lore. I know that some people will adore lore. And because Warframe is a free-to-play game, having something that gives the player the realization that there is a lot of lore to Warframe would maybe hook more players to it. Yo, Rancid Jimmy, thank you for the follow, dude. Welcome to the family and welcome to the Dapper Nation. I tip my hat to you, sir. But again, that's a lot of what I'm going to be talking about at the start is my personal opinion and more of a critical acclaim to it than anything else. You may have your own opinion on what is good, what is bad about Warframe. I'm merely saying from my experience and my perspective what I think works and what doesn't. So, you know, you can tell me how shit I am in the comments of this video in the description down below, but for this, it is just my opinion, okay? So let's carry on. We're going to go with Volt. Volt was a really good introduction to a sort of combo between two different types. Volt had some interesting casting mechanics and has some good utility between his weapons as well. Mag was more of the emphasis towards caster, and Excalibur was more emphasized towards being a melee-based frame. See, you see what I mean? They just suddenly jumped to English, and there was no real, like, reason, I suppose. I suppose a continuity would be nice. So,
no. We are taking this one with us.
This I don't quite get either.
I can't lose another Tenno. I'm surging your Warframe's power systems.
Because the way this segment started, it almost seems like they were there to kill you, and then they decided to take you. And the thing is, especially, if you notice that the second they leave, you only have to deal with the grenade. Vor doesn't come back, there's no alert, there's no common logic to why they're not coming to get you at this point. And I suppose that's just a nitpick more than anything else. So from a new player's perspective, this is the first thing you're going to see. You're going to have two grenades to fight. You're going to be given a couple little instructions on the side that tell you what to do with your abilities. You don't actually have to do this. You can, if something I found out quite recently during the Plains of Eidolon event is you can literally jump on people. You can Goomba stomp them to kill them, and it's kind of funny. And it sort of gives you, if you do decide to explore things and play with the idea of what you can do in the early game, you get this like initial setup that you don't have to play the way the game tells you to. And that's something that's been very explorative with Warframe. It's something that's very rewarding. You don't have to play the game the way it tells you to. You can play the game the way you want to. And that is one of the main things I love about Warframe. There is no set way of playing the game. You play how you want, and usually you'll be able to enjoy it. There is very little within Warframe that punishes you for playing the way you want. Because Warframe is incredibly casual in the way it plays, because it's incredibly friendly, because it's very open, it's very rare that you'll find an instance where you're punished for trying to be playful with the playstyle. Now, the first thing that a new player will come to grips with quite quickly is how quick-paced and how fast fights will happen in Warframe. Okay, I'm just gonna lower this a second, because that Lotus, I love you, baby, but you're too noisy. I gotta put you down a second. I gotta take that speech down. Take it down a level. Take it down a level. I just guess we'll just put it all to medium, I suppose. Actually, I'm going to put the speech up a little bit because it is nice to listen to what they say too. I think this is one thing I absolutely love. From the word go, you are presented with dynamic and very high production quality of voice, of visual, and of the aesthetic and a setting, a feel for the game, so to say. What's the word for it? atmosphere. You get such a sense of atmosphere in this game, and that is one of the things that Warframe pulls off dramatically in droves, even from the word go. And I think one of the biggest things that really hooks a player when they get into it is the fact that it is obviously a free game, and you get such quality of content for a free game. That is one of the big pulls for this. Like, you look at the sort of architecture and the structure and the way things are laid out and just the little nuances and little attentions to detail that you get. Like, you come back here, this is where you start. You never see this again. And yet this entire room is constructed in such a way to blast your eyes with just brilliant design work, lovely little architecture parts, and it's a very beautiful way of introducing a new player to the sort of visuals they're going to be expecting down the line. And again, so you get some. Okay, this is going to be one of my negatives towards the starters. There needs to be a bit more explanation, and you might be saying here, well, Warframe is a game that dumps you in and expects you to be able to play the way you want to. That's fair enough. But in my eyes, at least for the tutorial, at the very least for the tutorial, there needs to be a little more to make the player realize what it is they're doing. For example, some players like to be able to weigh up what it is they're doing. Now, this is a really good example here. Like, a player that really wants to understand the core mechanics of the game would love to see numbers. Numbers are vital. Numbers, for an MMO especially, is a really good way for a player to know what they're in for in the future. So let's just take, for example, these weapons. You have your Scarnet, you have your Bow Prime, you have your Bow even. Now, in of themselves, they give you a little description. That's great, but it doesn't give you numbers. Some players would like to know, how fast does this attack? What's the type of damage it deals? How much damage does it deal? Kind of like, a good example would be World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft, the weapons you pick up, they tell you what type of weapon they are, how much damage they do, how quick they attack, the stat weights they have. I think that would work well for the beginning of the game. Just to give you, because you can find this information later in the game anyway, but for a new player, it would be great to have an explanation as to what the stats are, what type of damage they do, and just a general synopsis as to the damage types you can be dealing. So, for example, just have it here with a little explanation as to bow, impact damage, slow speed type, long range, that sort of thing. Because it gives the player a bit more to work with and a bit more to understand that this game is going to be very based on numerics down the line. Because a lot of what Warframe is, it comes down to the numbers, it comes down to percentage. And something that I think would work even with that in conjunction would be to have like an option to go to a codex to read more into it. Because a lot of what happens at the start of Warframe for a new player is that they don't get enough information, and the worst thing to have to do for a new player, like, in a game, the first thing you should do is you should get immersed. You shouldn't have to then go to a wiki page to find out what it is you're meant to be doing within the first hour of the game, I feel. That is one of the things that could severely be improved on with the start of this game, and it's something that you get to see a lot more of later. So, right off the bat, I love to take bow, just because sticks, weapons of that nature. Lovely weapon. They do a good job of gating this area. You only actually get to leave this section once you've picked up the weapon, which is quite clever. I've like religiously tried to leave this area as well. Something that would be nice here is, as you went to fight your first dudes, is if it showed you the type of melee combos you can get. Because unless you go looking for it, you never see this. This is hidden away in a menu. The only way you get to see your melee type or how different attack modes work is by finding out for yourself. And again, that's fine for a later stage, but at the start, it would be nice to know that it's there. I suppose, realistically, they're trying to get you through this starting area at a regular pace, which is absolutely fine. That's a very good way of going about it. But maybe just a quick explanation as to different stance mods or something where you can attack differently, or like holding down the attack button to be able to get a charged attack, for example. They obviously show you how to do stealth attacks, how to creep and all that stuff, which is great. That's a really good introduction for the mechanics of stealth down the line. And again, here, for example, something that would have been nice just to see the damage types they do, the different reload speeds, and maybe just a quick explanation saying that secondary weapons are not meant to be your forte in this game. They're there as a backup almost. Boop. Boop. Okay, and this is something that sort of needs to be not so much as addressed, but it's something I've noticed recently. I feel like the AI in this game is a little bit dated at this point. There needs to be a bit of a... I would love to see an update made to the way the AI plays in this game.
Take what you can. You will require resources to build yourself into a diverse and effective warrior.
Because you'll notice a lot with throughout the game, the AI of the enemy are pretty stupid. Like, they will handily walk to their death into fire that's blatantly in front of them. And I know it's very hard. It's going to be hard to keep the AI for every single enemy in the game consistent.
There's the extraction ship.
This is pretty cool. I love watching this bit. I feel like this would have been a really good place to have the example of
Ready to face war now.
being too ballsy in this game or taking on enemies that are outside of your player's skill, because there's no actual penalty for staying in this area. You can stay in this area all you want after this is said, and you get no penalty whatsoever. Like Vor, this guy that's meant to be able to kill you in one hit, you can beat on him and you can just stay in this area indefinitely with no penalty whatsoever. So I would think that this area would be a really good place to have an example of what it is to die, because you're going to die in this game a lot. And I think if they would have made it here so that you had a definite knockdown, where Lotus would then help you get up again, just to show what happens when you do decide to go in over your head, I think that would have been a really good time to have had that. Also, Void's a pussy here. Even when you decide to straight up fight him, even though you're told not to, again, no penalty. He's meant to be this badass dude who can pretty much kill you in one shot apparently, but he stays there just letting you beat on him. So moving on, we got the other enemies here. Again, no real it's a bit of a beat 'em up slug at this point. You can either shoot them, you can either hit them.
Flows like fire over the battle terrain.
This bit I quite liked. This was a pretty good explanation to wall running. I think there could have been maybe a little bit more emphasis on the wall running, considering how important it is to know how to jump and fly and flip in this area. But I guess they sort of expect you to pick that up as you go, which is entirely fine. Okay, so then you come across your first main primary weapon. And again, numbers would be nice, but you get to figure out which one you want to use. And you can actually go, which I really like as well, you can go back and change them if you wish.
Has done to your warframe, but we cannot remove it now.
I personally always love to go with the assault rifle because stealth is for pussies. Alright. Kill these dudes, carry on. And now we're just going to make our way on towards the final part of the tutorial here. I think something that would be nice as well is just a quick explanation as to material would it be nice to know a bit more about the resources? They do briefly say that resources are important. I suppose it's sort of to be expected that resources are important. But maybe just having like a quick show of your inventory, just showing you've picked it up and that it's important to you. Okay, so obviously I'm criticizing this quite heavily. I'm not really going over so much of the positives. Like, this is still a very good tutorial. You get all the necessary fundamentals given to you, which is ideal. It gives the player a good sense of what they're expecting later in the game. I think this bit in particular should have been a bit longer, because this part in particular is very short and it feels very epic trying to defend your lander. Like, holding off waves of enemies like this is probably one of the fun parts of the game that just never really gets old. And I think if they would have expanded on this a little bit and maybe had Vor come in here to then show that it's time to leave, that would have been pretty cool. But as it stands, you literally hold off maybe 10, 15 enemies at most and then you get to leave. Having a sense of impending doom here would have been really, really nice. Yo, Dennis Gamer, thank you for the follow, dude. Welcome to the stream. Hello, subscriber. Hello, The Dark. Welcome, welcome. If you're just tuning in, guys, we're currently doing a segment of Operation from Scratch. We're going from the beginning of the game. We're analyzing the beginning, and we're going to be seeing what it's like for a new player to play Warframe. So, I do apologize if I missed some of your messages. So, this is the first time you get to actually experience your hub. Now, from the hub, otherwise known as your lander, this is probably one of my most admirable part. One of the bits I find the most well designed and well thought out. So the lander is obviously where everything happens for you. This is where everything is going to commence from. This is where you get to... It's basically like your options menu. You think of the lander to be like a start menu for any other game. You have your different... like each individual segment in here is going to be a different options menu for like a start menu, for example. But you also get this integral bit of conversation going that where Orders is talking to you, introducing you to different things. You get to your character customization screen, and it's a really ergonomic way of having a very interactive selection menu, and that works really well. Something that I think needs to be a bit more emphasized here is the codex. It's offline right now, but for anyone that doesn't know, the codex is where all the information is. For Warframe, or everything that you could possibly need to know is in your codex. But the thing that I think it needs to be expanded on more, because one of the biggest things that I think a lot of early players will find is that there's just not enough information to go on to give you an understanding as to what it is you're doing here. Like, having the option to look at who Vort is in the early stage, or look at what this little doohickey on your leg is doing. Like, you do get an emphasis of what it is and an idea as to what it's doing to you, but there's no real explanation as to why. And I think for a lot of players who like to understand what's going on, and players who like to take things a bit slower and be able to play the game the way they want to, having the option, not the necessity, but the option to have more information would be lovely. A question from LT Brown Coat. Is it easier to play with controller or keyboard? The great thing with Warframe is the fact that you can play it with controller and keyboard on PC. I personally, in my eyes, feel that you can play... At the lower levels, you can quite easily play with controller, and it is all personal preference. If you've gotten used to a keyboard, I'd say stick with keyboard. If you've gotten used to a controller, stick with controller. Just realize that with a keyboard and mouse, you do have that quick fire reactions to be able to just move a lot quicker. It is personal choice, though. I know a lot of people who do prefer playing with controller, though. I think something that would have been nicer as well would have been to explain why there was what this lander was doing in that area, like that entire area that you started in. Just a quick explanation as to where it is and what it is would have been lovely. It would have set the premise of. Thank you, Lotus. It would have been great to have a bit more of a setup as to where you came from, because like. From start until end, that entire tutorial segment lasts maybe 10 minutes. And for a lot of players, Warframe being almost it is a very narrative game where you do have a lot of story elements going on. It would have been great to have had a bit more of a push towards explaining, like, especially for when a new player gets into Warframe, they want to know what the universe is, what their role is, what they want setup and an understanding as to where they fit in. And this bit especially here, something that would have been really cool here is just have a quick explanation as to what your overlay is, just an understanding as to what each map does, what your main goal should be. Like having a suggestions box would be nice, I think, because the game is very open. That's one of the really defining factors of Warframe. It is very open. You are always being told this game is open. It's up to you what you do. But there's not enough setup for the individual segments to understand what it is you're doing, if that makes sense. Because from the word go, you're doing your main storyline. You do the Vor's quest line. You have different mission types within this, but they're never explained. And you might be sat there saying, well, you don't need to be explaining them. You experience them through doing them. That's fine, but a lot of I feel like a lot of players would get a lot more benefit in the early stages of the game and a bit more understanding by just having a quick explanation as to what each mission type does. Maybe the ability of doing a simulacrum of each mission type with a rundown of what each mission type is. Maybe not so much have it on here, but have a button up here or somewhere on the overlay that gives you the ability of testing each mission type to explain what they are, what the objective is, and a quick demonstration as to what that mission type does. That way, at least it's an option. You don't have to do it, but the option is there to be able to learn a little bit. Because I think that would give players a lot more an understanding of what they're going to expect, and it gives them training as well. Because like a lot of what players will often get completely carried through the content. A lot of players won't even stop to understand what it is they're doing because they're getting carried through. And you don't get to learn enough in your own time. And having the option to do something on your own without the penalty of dying all the time, to just test things. Because the only way you ever get to test out anything in this game is by finding the simulacrum, and that is only done way down the line. Everything up until that is you just mashing your face against missions until you actually learn how to do it, which for a new player is really, really jarring. But going to a more positive note, so this is the first mission you end up doing on the Vor's questline, and right off the bat, you get introductions to the planet you're on and the general aesthetic, the general playstyle, and you get to revisit some of the stuff you learned from the tutorial, which is great. It reinforces some of the stuff you learned, some of the priorities, some of the stealth mechanics, and you still get a really lovely introduction to the absolutely astounding attention to detail within this game. Just the sheer scope and the themes that run through this game and how pretty it is, it does often make up for just the lack of explanation or whatever, and you know, you can often forgive a game for doing that when it's not as forthcoming with all that sort of information. And I can respect that, because you are also rewarded for exploring. You go down these little tight avenues, you can often find little material bundles, which is great. Helps the player realize that exploring is an important part of this game. Like, you find all these things, and just the randomness of some elements of what spawns here. Like some of these caches won't always be open, and some of them will be closed. And when you find some of these little caches that are hidden away, it is very rewarding, and you do get that satisfaction of realizing that your exploration has been rewarded. I think this area here would have been a really good example to demonstrate the different type of enemies. Like, when you come into this area, having a little cinematic segment that shows you what type of Grineer you're going to be fighting would have been nice. So, obviously, you come in here, and you've got this guy here, you've got the Scorpions, but they're never really explained what they do or what you should be watching out for. So, like, just a quick introduction saying, this is a Lancer, this guy shoots you. This is a Scorpion, this guy will tug you around, but it's weaker. And, you know, this is a Kubro den. This spawns evil Kubros that will try to nibble your testicles off. Don't stay near them. Shoot the Kubro den to stop the Kubro spawning. You know, that sort of thing. Just a little bit of explanation there. Just to help a player understand what it is they're fighting, you know? It would go a long way for a player realizing the importance of prioritizing targets, shooting, aiming for specific things, what to keep an eye out for in the environment, that sort of thing, you know? Alright, so moving on. We now have to do essentially a spy mission where you hack a target. And this is a really good introduction to the first hacking materials. Now this I'm not so fussed with this one, specifically telling you what to do, because it is very straightforward and obvious, and I think sometimes being forced to learn by yourself is a really good way, like avenue by trial by fire, so to say. And actually, this is the first example of divergent gameplay. Because you don't have to go down here initially. Because you have the option of going down here, around the back. Or, if you're a more explorative player, you do then explore things and you realize that there's a door up here that you can go through and skip that entire segment around the back where there was an enemy waiting and a door you have to hack. And that's something that's really great about this game. You are very much rewarded for being an explorative player who tries to try things rather than just following what they're told to. So there you go. And I think what would be nice here is just a quick explanation as to what you're doing is a spy mission. But then again, if you had the simulacrum open to you from the word go just to show you what the different mission types are, I just suppose you wouldn't really need to. So you see, okay, so this is what I'm going to use as an example as to the enemy AI. So the enemy AI is a little bit wonky in my eyes, as they tend to all just shuffle forwards with no real strategic aim. They're basically lining up to be killed at this point, and it is a bit immersion breaking when you see enemies basically ignoring all, like, the enemy that is meant to be a military might that has conquered the galaxy, that has been able to rule hundreds of planets, to conquer the universe, to have military might against any other, like, oppress the universe almost. They basically line up in a line and die to a single thing. I mean, fair enough, you are basically a super ninja, but, you know, you would think there would be some kind of hope for a strategic aim here, because literally, I mean, I love the fact there is the ability, you obviously see them fighting here as well. If you do spawn the Kubras early on. Oh dear, Kubra, you're a little broken there, buddy. Let me put you down there. But there's no real aim for strategic fighting here. They're all kind of just stood around doing their own thing, sort of. And again, it is. I think this just comes down to like very old AI types, and I think maybe an improved AI would maybe make it a bit more believable, the kind of enemy you're fighting, that they are a military might rather than just mindless robots. To answer the question in the chat, yes, this is Project from Scratch. We've basically started again and again just to get this bit recorded. This is going to end up on YouTube. We're doing this as an analytical version of what the beginning for a warframe is like for a new player from a veteran's eyes. And again, this is just my opinion. This is just scrutinizing and criticizing the beginning of the game. In my eyes, the beginning of the game is amazing. I love the beginning of Warframe. It is a very immersive, very pretty, glorious beginning to a game. We're just looking at what could have been improved, what is really good, what works well, what doesn't work well. And we're sort of reimagining, we're re-experiencing the game from the word go. But that first mission is really nice. But what would really be nice now, and this is, I think, the biggest and most important thing that I think they are missing. The Grineer are humans, yes. And see, that is a thing that should be explained. Or at least have the option of being explained. Because in the early stages of the game, you're not told anything about who you're fighting. Having the option to have a more in-depth explanation as to who you're fighting gives you much more connection to the game. So when you load into your first mission, for example, having something on a little side note that says, press here to learn about the Grineer. It's not mandatory then. It's an option. You have the option to learn more about who you're fighting. And just having a quick rundown as to who the Grineer are with statistics on the type of enemies you're fighting. Like, then you wouldn't have to obviously have the cinematic to then show you the individual enemies you're fighting. It would give you... In the way I would say, I would love to see a drop-down menu showing learn about the Grineer. You press that, and it shows you a Grineer soldier. And then you have the option of flicking through the different types of Grineer soldiers you fight from the word go. And it gives you stat weights on them, it tells you what they are, who they are, a bit of lore behind them, what to look out for, the type of weapons they use, what to use against them, that sort of thing. That would give you at least the option of learning more to understand who it is you're fighting and give you a bit more immersion within that world, because a lot of players love playing games for the story, for the immersion within that world, but when you're not given anything from the word go, it makes it hard for you to relate to the characters and to also the game. Like, for example, I know you're not meant to know what these warframes are, but just a brief overview as to how you end up in that pod, or what end up Vor finding you at the very start would have been just a little more to immerse you, because I think what Warframe lacks at the very start is that immersion. You basically almost treat this like World of Warcraft, where you get in and you just instantly go off and start killing things for the sake of killing things. There's no reason to what you do. Okay, so back to my point earlier as to something that really needs to be put down here. Mods. Mods are the pivotal, key part of Warframe that defines how you are as a player and how good you are. Mods are part of the game that determine your damage, that how effective you are, how good you are at the game almost. There's no explanation at all as to what mods are. You get into the game, and you're told to mod your character. That's great. I'm going to mod my character. What do mods do? Okay, first few questions. What are mods? What are the stat weights? How do the stat weights affect your weapon? How important they are. That isn't that. So many players think that the importance behind weapons and how much damage you do is based on the weapon itself. At no point does the game then explain to you that the mods are the important part. Because a lot of players play for days and weeks before they even realize that mods are the vital part of the game. And that ruins a lot of the players' feeling of gratitude for playing the game well. Because then you feel like an idiot for not realizing it sooner and hoping that you could have been told a bit sooner that maybe this would have been important to know. And again, we are going down this avenue of maybe criticizing too heavily here, where they're basically saying, well, maybe you should find this out. But you shouldn't have to wiki something within the first couple hours of the game. This is the big problem. I do not think that in any sense that the game should lack that much information that you have to wiki something in the first 2 hours of the game. So at this point, you get access to your codex, and the codex is great. As it is, it gives you enough information to understand about the factions, but it's all sectioned off. You don't get any access to it, and this is obviously found later as you play the game by scanning the codex fragments. I love the fact they have a list of all the different things you can aim for. This I love. The fact they have it all available, all open to you to show you what there is in the game. You have a huge list that you can then use to aim for what you want to get in the game. And it gives the player something to aim for. It gives the player something to focus on, to maybe make a list of things they want to make, what they want to build for. And you know, there is then the element of the lore behind the characters for the frames individually, but not so much on the actual damage type. Well, I suppose obviously that's perspective. There is a bit to it, but it's not as in depth as it could be. Essentially, is the way I'm trying to put it. I think the codex works really well the way it is. There could just be a bit more to it, and I think a bit more preface towards actually looking at the codex. Because the amount of players I've talked to in the past who actually don't even know the codex exists is astounding. Like, they have all the basis of things that work really well here, but it's just not explained enough upon for a new player. How to farm rubido? Earth. Go to Earth. Just do Earth missions. There's plenty of rubido. And that's something as well. The explanation of materials, it's never really kept up with much. Like, if you ever want to find out what material you're farming for, you obviously go down to this little notch here. Having a quick little thing, like, for example, in what I hate using World of Warcraft as the example, but it is a game that sort of has the tutorial down to a T, so they get to play understanding what they're doing. In the tutorial for World of Warcraft, you get things get highlighted, and you get a little text box that explains what they are. Having a little text box that would explain this and just what each material does with a little defining descriptor would have been great. But no. Anyway, I think the star map from a new player's perspective as well is really, really nice, because you get to see the entire map, apart from a couple of little segments that unlock later, but that actually gives you an even greater sense of accomplishment when you unlock them. And especially if you didn't really look into it as to what your aim is. I think one thing here that would really be great is to give yourself a goal. Something to tell you where your main storylines will end up. Like, just have something here to show you the quests you haven't completed yet. That way you have a list of things that you can complete and aim for. Because as it stands, there's no... and again, we're going down this avenue of being told what to do and what not to do, and this whole thing of Warframe is you're allowed to do what you want. But you don't know what you want to do at this point, because none of the quests are really showed to you. And maybe just highlighting having a little section of here that has the available quests you haven't completed, and then highlighting the map they start on, would be a really good way to give players a list of things they can do. Because a lot of players in general of any game love lists. It's why questing in World of Warcraft works, because there's a list of quests you can complete in the order you want to, and it gives you an objective. But that, again, it still works for what it is. It shows you the map, shows you where you can go, shows you what you can expect. And one thing that I think works amazingly well in Warframe is the diversity in map types. There is no planet, other than maybe some of the ship levels, that look the same. Earth is completely different to Venus. Venus is completely different to Uranus. And every map feels unique in most regards. And you do get that sudden change from being on a lush, vibrant Earth to suddenly going to Venus, which is desolate and horrible and icky and out to kill you. And you do get that sense of change enough where it feels quite satisfying to know. And this is also about the time where you start playing with other players as well. So going through Vor's questline, I think the best way of looking at Vor's questline, which is the first questline you'll do, it is a great introduction to the game. You get a sense of the game, you get a sense of what you're expected to do, you get a very brief overview to some lore, and it does give you plenty of time to get to grips with the movement style, to hunt for materials, things you're going to be expecting in the future. Can you do the quests in any order? Are they specific lore-wise? So most of the quests you can just pick up whenever you want. A lot of them have some prerequisites, like certain mastery levels. This is never really explained, though, until you actually get to looking at them, which I think is quite nice. Like, having certain quests in the order they are works nicely, because you don't then go and do a mission that's, like, completely out of your level. But this is quite a nice segment to explain when you start working with other players. I think just quickly having something here saying this is another player would be nice. I mean, it's not really necessary, but just to explain that you will be working with other players would be nice. Or explaining what a team composition can be, like saying that this is your other player, this is their weapons, that sort of thing. Just having the option of that maybe would be nice. So going through, we're killing some more dudes, none of which really pose any threat. And at this point as well, you haven't really found anything that's really going to kill you. I think at some point from the start of the tutorial to the end of Vor's questline, there should be something within that questline that instantly kills you. Just to show that you can die in this game. And how it is you then get back up, how it is you revive other players. Because this is a very emphasized team game, and there isn't really much to tell you how to play as a team in the early stages and what it is to help your teammates. Is there a way to change the camera view back from right to left shoulder? H. H is the button that allows you to change shoulder angles. Now this is probably one of my favorite characters in the game, and I absolutely love this guy, and he will appear as a quest later down the line as well. Oh, Darvo. Oh, Darvo. You beautiful man, you, with your beautiful voice.
Your success here depends on getting Darvo out of there, alive.
And some of these little quips from Lotus and everything, and all the dialogue. Okay, so one of the really beautiful things about this game, the characters. All of the characters feel unique. All the characters feel as though they have their own little story. They all have their own little universe, and they've all been thought out really well to be extremely dynamic. There is no character that I can think of in this game that you actually talk to or interact with or have a quest for that are the same. They all have their own personalities. They're all really believable into being who they are. And I love how they've designed the world and the atmosphere and the characters to be so likable and just so varied. Because it's very easy for a game like Warframe to have every character that you interact with is the same cookie cutter type of character. And this is one of the things that I think really draws players in is you want to learn more. You want to find out more about this world you're in. You want to find out more about the people you're interacting with, more about the characters you're dealing with, and just more about everything that you're going through. Because there's so little given to you in the early game, and I think this works well for the way the game is at the moment. You're always trying to find more. The trouble is, the ability of finding more isn't really explained to you in the early stages, and you sort of just get left to find it by chance, almost, and expect to learn it yourself. No, you did not have randomness. We didn't do it. We didn't hit the goal in time. So, just to give a quick emphasis here, if you guys in the chat, quickly, give me the things that you love and hate about the tutorial and the beginning the start of when you started the game. What was the thing you found hardest to understand, and what was the thing you enjoyed the most in Warframe? So this is about the time where you start really looking at your mods. You do get a brief overview as to what they are, but you never get explained how, why, or what. And I think having the how and the why and the what for any part of Warframe just adds so much depth to everything. Like right here, for example, this is your first introduction to mods. I mean, you are sort of led to believe just it is what it is. It's what it says on the tin. But why are they fractured? How do I get better mods? How do I quit mods? How do I improve my mods? All these questions, they're never really answered until you find out for yourself. How damage works, thoughts, elemental damage. So the dice says he wanted to know how the damage works, the thoughts on elemental damage, and proc types, what it takes to proc something. Entirely agree with that, and that's something I've sort of glanced over as well. Complete says it's way too broad, far as mods and such have to learn on the fly. Yeah, that's kind of what we're going over now. That's entirely agreed with that one. It is very hard to get everything in your head from the word go, and there's no real help with learning it. I hate that I generally can't get damaged ammo drums outside the tutorial. Best mod should be more available. Oh, we love our ammo drums, baby. Most valuable mod in the game. Hardest to understand is why my systems can't handle it. Well, that's down to your computer, I'm afraid. I literally just started yesterday, and I think I got frustrated with mods because your ship keeps telling you to hurry up and equip a mod, and there's no how to jump and dash properly. That is indeed true. That is kind of what we're going over with and emphasizing here. I think something they could have done, and this is sort of something I was mentioning with some of the other stuff earlier, just having the option, having a button up here somewhere that says explain mods, and then even if it's linking a YouTube video, that Warframe themselves have made, that quickly, like, I'm going to use Smite as an example here. Smite has a link on each map type they have to explain what the map is, what the objective is, and how to go about playing it, what type of roles you're expected to play. And it's an option. You don't have to watch that video to play it, but it helps you if you do. And I think having that option for like mods, for frames, where it gives you a more in-depth understanding would be so much better for players to be able to understand what it is they're doing. But I think that is just a personal preference, and it is... Well, I think the avenue we have to look at here is the fact that Warframe wants you to learn yourself. And that they have to monopolize your time because it is a free-to-play game. So they want you to be playing this game for as much as possible, and the way they do that is just by letting you experience it yourself. So whether you agree with their methods, whether you don't, I think we just have to understand that the game is very good the way it is. It's just that we are looking at the way they could improve it and the way that it could have been better for new players. Because the way you get more time out of players is by making them play, by keeping them in the game. And keeping the player in the game is often the hardest part. And I think some of these things we were talking about is just the way you could keep a player in the game longer. I think people need to stop QQ and play the game and talk with people. Yeah, well, exactly. But there's no real push towards that in the game, I feel. It's all just left to you to experience yourself, which is fine. It's a personal choice that you then go with. So obviously then you get the point where you start modding your gear. And this is something that I think would be worth explaining as well. Have something up here explaining what your capacity is, how you upgrade your capacity, not just let it happen and let the player just realize it for themselves. Because in this day and age where gaming is getting harder and harder to in this day and age where players are expecting more and more from games, it's kind of, I would say bad, but it's not good practice. It's not going to keep a player playing if they're not fed something, at least something, or at least having the option. Valkyrie Prime says the game is also really unforgiving. Initially, you try to install it on a potato, where a machine can get 30 plus 56. Yeah, when it comes down to performance with the game, that's sort of a different subject. I'm not really going to go into that in this video. I'm going to let the if it's down to performance, I think that's more of a different video, but. Yeah. Go to the Codex Press on training. Polarities, I think, is something that need a bit more explanation. Like, training is definitely a thing that's quite easy to go through. But the thing that needs to be, I think, explained a little bit better is just in-your-face information. Like, this is great and everything, but this is on the codex. You never get told to go to the codex. Most players will never go to the codex within the first few days of them playing. Like, there needs to be something that leads you to the codex to take a look at it. Because most players will be like, oh, well, I can't seem to find it anywhere, I'll just go look at the wiki. Or I just won't bother looking at it at all and just hope I get taught it later. Like, there does come a time where, like, I personally didn't look in my codex for the first week of me playing. Only after a week of playing did I realise how important the codex actually was. And yes, what Unit says is very true. You can't expect people to tell you in this game. A lot of what happens in Warframe is you deal with real people who have anonymity of being online. So you can't expect people in any game, not just Warframe, but in any game in general, to just tell you what to do. I don't know if this helps, but the wiki has a section in each Warframe info page and skill maximization. Yes, but Francis, the thing we're trying to emphasize here is that we're trying to show that Warframe needs something so that you don't go to the wiki. In the first 2 or 3 hours of a new player's experience in a game, you shouldn't have to go to the wiki. When a new player picks up Warframe or any game in general, the first thing you should do is have immersion by playing. And that's like a good 3 or 4 hours worth of playing in a solid line, or whatever you want to do. In the first 3 hours of a game, you should just get the pure experience of the game without having to go to a website or somewhere that isn't in the game to get an explanation on what it is. Dat Halty, thank you for the follow, dude. Welcome to the stream, appreciate it. I tip my hat to you, sir. And maybe, like, I'm not saying have the information literally blaring in the character's face, but just have a bit more of a hinted direction towards where to go to find more information, even if it is the wiki, but have the option to have that information readily available. So if the player is confused, they know where to go to look, you know? So if I suddenly get confused by what elemental type damages are, I can have a button somewhere on my screen where it's relevant to tell me where to go to look for that information, or have a brief information about it, and then a link to somewhere or a post somewhere that takes you to a more in-depth guide, or like for example, if I'm looking at a mod that says flame damage, fire damage, if I want to find out more about fire damage, have a button that says more information, and then it gives you a brief description of what fire damage is. But if you want to find more, then it gives you a push towards going to the codex, where it'll have an in-depth description over it. There's, yo, Unit 0420, thank you for the follow, dude. We're not putting negativity towards the wiki DX. We are trying to make emphasis towards the fact that the wiki shouldn't be your go-to point of interest in the first 4 or 5 hours of playing a game. The game should be able to explain enough for you to understand it, so that if you then want to find out more, the wiki is something you look towards in the latter half of your first few hours of playing the game. Like, you got to understand as well that players in this day and age want to be able to... Players want ease of access. Ease of access means that a player can play the game without getting frustrated with complexity and unnecessary tandem. In a game that is free to play to everybody, where you will get so many players and new people coming in every day, restricting and making it hard for a player to find this information, it's hard for that player to then feel like they're earning their information, or they're not, like, learning from the game itself. They feel like they've gone out of the way to not play the game to find the information that should almost be readily available in the game. Well, exactly. What it's an emphasis towards being able to learn the game without relying on a secondary source. And again, we are looking at this from a critical analytical point of view. We're not looking at this to literally shit on the game or the developers. We're not looking at this to point salt or negativity towards anything. We are looking at this from a new player's perspective with a veteran's eyes. I've played this game for 2.5 years every day for the last 2 years as a full-time job. And for any player that's played this game a lot, they'll probably have the same sort of comments or gripes or comments towards the positives. Like, for example, we have been looking at the positives as well. I absolutely love the pacing. And I think that's sort of something that can be said towards why they don't maybe put so much information at the start, is because they just want the player to play the game. But I think that's more of an older method of experiencing a game. That was something that was sort of more relevant when World of Warcraft was still pretty fresh. That sort of era where you just wanted to get in and beat up some dudes or kill some dudes or do some questing. But when there's so many people now having access to games like Warframe, and there's just such a general access to gaming in general, and there's so many more options for free-to-play games now, having more information is never a bad thing. We will be doing the Eidolons, we will be doing that sort of stuff in a bit. We're sort of just going through this from scratch little element first. We'll probably be doing this for a little bit longer, and then we'll swap over to doing something else for a little bit. We'll see, we'll see. But again, guys, if you are new to the stream, big thank you to everyone tuning in. This is a little segment we're doing for YouTube. ISOB1, thank you for the follow, dude. Welcome to the stream. We're creating this video more as a way to dynamify our content. We want something a bit more than just playing the game. And we want something out there that's a more honest opinion of the game as well. Like, I love DE. I love Warframe. I adore Warframe. I play it every day. But it's always worthwhile giving information to new players who may not find out otherwise. Alright, so that was the end of that little segment, and that's sort of like the second to last bit from this quest. So we'll get on, we'll complete this mission, and then I think we'll move on, we'll do the next part in another episode of this. So this entire Vor's quest line, things that work, the pacing. Every mission is about the same length, every mission has an objective, a goal, and it teaches you a little bit every time. And I think that's one thing that would really keep a player playing, is the satisfaction of being a super awesome space ninja of doom. Because really, that is what this game is. Like, it doesn't lie about what it is. You get it literally on the tin. It says ninjas play free, and that's what you do. You play as a ninja in space for free. And that's what people want sometimes. Some people don't really care about the intrinsicness of it. Sometimes people just want to play a ninja for the sake of playing a ninja. This isn't exactly going to be a game guide, Gum. This is more just going to be a analytical view of the game for a new player, at least, from a veteran's eyes. Because obviously we've had our experience in this game. We're veterans of this game now. We want to be able to look at this game with new eyes and see what works for a new player and what doesn't work for a new player. I love this voice. Darvo! Me Darvo! I'm gonna lie, some of the dialogue in this does make me want to bite my own tongue, but you know. But Ordis! Everyone loves Ordis, though. Here's a question in the chat, though, guys. Which is your favourite character in the game, not including Clem? You can't choose Clem. I'm not letting you.
But Clem's so cute.
Alright, we're going to make our way towards the second to last mission for Vor's Prize now. Tare Gore. This is the thing, and this I think your answers will sort of give me a good example here, but the characters in this game are so, I wouldn't say not relatable, but they're all extremely enjoyable. Like, they all have their own little quips, they all have their own little personalities to them, except for, like, the sergeant. But they're all incredibly well designed. They all come across with their own personalities, and I think that's something that, along with the aesthetic of the game, really helps sell the playstyle of the game. So you get dumped off on this planet now, which is, I think, still on Earth, maybe? I can't actually remember off the top of my head. But being dumped on this ice map is like, it's such a quick change to a different map type. It's almost like jarring initially, but I think once the player gets used to the map and just has a quick browse around, the sudden change of enemy type and the sudden change of location is actually quite enjoyable. Again, something that would have been nice here is to quickly explain who the corps are, because even, at least with the Grenier, you obviously get an introduction to them through the opening cinematic, But coming into this mission, you literally just start gunning down these people that you don't even know who they are, or what enemy type they are, or what they do, or what the enemies are. So kind of like how I was mentioning with the Grineer, where it would have been great to have a bit of information on what the enemy types are, what they weak to, what they're good at, what to expect from them. Having something here to just quickly explain what the corpus are and what enemy types they have, what is good against them, what doesn't work against them, or at least the option to see that would be really cool. Not mandatory, obviously, because obviously it still works the way it is, but just having something there just to quickly explain something, just to give you a bit of information, the option for information at least, would be awesome. Why you can't see the Syndicate missions in my navigation? I've joined Syndicate, but nothing was it relay. You might need to wait for the Syndicate missions to restart. They restart every day at, I think, 5 PM, along with the sorties. Alternatively, just log out and log back in. Might solve your problem. Alright, so now we're given the objective to go and get some resources that the corpus stole, or like had, or just like get materials, because we need them to make the thing to get rid of the thing on our ankle. And I think a lot of what could be put down with the story here is everything is powered by MacGuffins. If you don't know what MacGuffin is, a MacGuffin is a item used for a plot device for the sake of a plot device to push the story forwards. And I have no problem with that. I think this game works well with that because it does help drive forward the story. But you could literally replace the thing on your leg with anything and it would still help drive forward the story. Like, just have a MacGuffin.
You have murdered my sons and disgraced me before my queen.
Poor old Vor.
The Ascaris will complete its task and bring you to me.
Poor baby. Right, so, oops. Oh dear, there we go. Down to my death I go. Oh god. Please tell me. Oh, thank god for that. So I was going to be stuck in a never-ending pit of death there. Where was I going with that? So, essentially, the way this sort of feels to me is that it's a very well thought out tutorial. It's designed to draw the player in. It's designed to make the player feel satisfaction. There just needs to be a bit. I think there just needs to be a little bit more, especially with how gaming in general has changed in the last couple of years. I feel a bit more explanation wouldn't go amiss. Alrighty. Yo, Braxfez Causa, thank you for the follow, dude. Welcome to the stream, appreciate that. Welcome to the family, and welcome to the Dapper Nation. Now we need to wait for this other dude to catch up, so let's just wait for him. Sitting in this class, like our teacher said she doesn't own a car, and I'm like, because you women the guy in the class died. Oh dear. Rip. Wah, 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 wah. So to you guys, what's the biggest importance when you first experience a new game, especially one that's like like Warframe, for example? What's the biggest importance and driving factor for you continuing to play that game? Not pay to win? I can agree with that one. Atmosphere, the bigger feeling in the world, bigger than just the game. Another really good example. Yo, Varix Prime with the follow as well. Welcome to the stream, my dude. Welcome to the Dapper Nation. Appreciate that. To be the best around. I think the way you can summarize that is just by saying a good sense of progression. Like, doing good in the game gives you a good, like, gives you satisfaction when you're able to do better. And I think, honestly, when you leave this first mission, this first quest, and you then are able to get weapons and mod yourself, I think the sense of scaling works really nicely in the early stages, because every time you equip a new mod, every time you upgrade a mod and actually have it on, you do actually notice the difference. And I think that I do think that works wonderfully in this game, is that as you do explore, you are rewarded for it. Oh my god, where is this guy? Oh, where is he? Yo, dude, you coming? Show me the way. Show you the way. I will show you the way. Alrighty, so we're going to move on to the last mission for this one, I think. I would like to see earlier that you have an option of trading mastery rank tests before doing them. Yeah, there's no real, like, they don't really ever give you any indicator that you have the chance of testing them, which would be really nice, because some of the mastery tests are just plain simple, but some of them can be a royal bitch, and you only really ever find out about the simulacrum, like, later down the line or by luck. Oh, Vor, please, at least buy me dinner first. But that's the thing, right? Like, it's... This is just, I think because Warframe's been around for so long, there is a bit of not misleading, but there's like, a lot of stuff doesn't really line up as much as it used to anymore. Like, this game is developed around like a 5-year-old idea now. And although it still works, it's not what you would really want now. Like, if they completely remade Warframe now, I feel like a lot of these things that we're talking about would probably be implemented. I think having like an example as to what a mastery test is before you go into a mastery test would be nice. Like, that would give you at least an idea as to what you're going to be getting into. And then have something that says, by the way, you can try these mastery tests by going to such and such. So go to a relay and then all that. And yeah, unfortunately, I think Warframe, the developers give the community, like people in general, a bit too much credit for being good people, because unfortunately, the vocal minority are usually the assholes, and those are always going to be the ones who will get their voices heard first. And you're never really, like, the players who actually help you are never really brought to the front. So maybe have something somewhere that's a beginner's channel. Like how you have different channels in your chat bar. Have a chat bar for beginners, right? Because all you have access to at the beginning is region, recruiting, and trading. In EVE Online, there are channels that the developers encourage you to join as a new player, where players of a similar standard to you are going to be. And then you get the chance to actually learn with players of your level. And I think that's something that definitely could be very beneficial for a new player, is to have hubs for new players. That X Halty, it might be you either need to reinstall the game, or it might be a connection issue, because that sounds like desync potentially. Yeah, I think what Unit says is quite valid. He says that the longer a game is out, the more unrelated, not so much the, I wouldn't say the worse it becomes, but the more out of touch it becomes with the initial idea of what that game initially was. Because as always, times change as the song goes. With times change, as do the communities, as do the games. And the thing is, Warframe, until recently, has been very much in its old state, until they did like Plains of Eidolon, where they really tried to bring Warframe into the modern era. A lot of the stuff that came out first that hasn't really been touched is still sort of going down that whole avenue that was sort of normal maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. That isn't so relevant now, and I think it's quite apparent, especially in the tutorial, where maybe the newer ideas of how gaming is in this day and age just isn't really put forward enough. And I think that's just because it was developed in that time where it wasn't really necessary. Yo, Skull Legend, thank you for the follow, dude. Welcome to the stream. I tip my hat to you, sir. All the positive vibes to you, my good sir. And for whoever's watching this on YouTube, I hope this is giving some kind of insight as to what to expect and things to look out for. Because I've noticed as well that there is just a general lack of information for new players. And this is sort of what this video is trying to put emphasis towards. And for us just to have a bit of fun with it, you know? This is a bit of content we're producing to give us something more than just the typical mod builds and guff of that nature. This is a really good part. I love this part. This is the first mission where you get a divergence in mission type, a divergence in your mission, where the objective of the mission changes. And this gives you some really good scope as to how the missions later down the line can be done in so many different ways. Like, for example, spy missions. You can complete spy missions in so many different ways, it's absolutely crazy. And this sort of gives you that idea that, and it reinforces the idea, especially from earlier when you did the initial hacking in the first mission, that you play the game the way you want. You can go and straight the exit, or you can get that added benefit of completing the extra bonus section of this as well.
That should take the pressure off the colonist ship, but you need to get out of there. Get to extraction before the reactor goes critical.
How you doing, Skull Legend? What's up, buddy? And I think it is pretty damn cool. Like, bashing down hordes of enemies. I think, going back to the whole AI issue, I think the AI in this game works really well for the infested. But when everything acts like the infested and they're just sort of charging toward their aimless demise, it does get a little bit distracting. The fact that they're not trying to have any self-preservation. Like, they do occasionally do things like put down a wall or anything, but it's nothing that's really like this guy. Look at this guy. I've got a gun in his face, and he's like, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you. Yeah. And this sort of helps. That does sort of go back to the whole thing of this is a very old game. It's been out for 5 years. This is the same sort of AI we were dealing with 5 years ago, where they just it is just the older content. I think needs a revitalization to make it a bit more relevant. And I get it. DE is not the biggest of companies, and they do amazingly well for what they have. These are just things that we notice, right? Favorite way to do spy missions is Limbo. Oh, dude. And my favorite way is just Rhino. Stomp, everything gets put in the air. Scanners can't scan you. And you just walk through. Just walk through. It's easy. Great tap. Thank you for the follow, dude. Welcome to the Dapper Nation. Appreciate that a lot, sir. Thank you very much. Oh, Lotus, you talk about your stuff again. Go on, then. Alright, so we have one more mission to do, I believe. Oh no, the detonator! I think one of the things that slightly that could have been done better here is that there's no sense of urgency here. Like, you're told that the thing on your leg or that the detonator inside you is going to explode, but there's no premise. There's no urgency to it. You know what I mean? Like, there's not any. There's never a sense of urgency to what's happening. Like, you get these occasional headaches. And it's like, oh, headaches. But there's not really anything that like shows you how bad or what you really have to hurry to get this thing off you. I think something that would have. I think if they had like a vision almost, or like another character that you spawned with that has the thing explode on them to show you what is going to happen to you. Or at some point in the storyline, there's like a little cutscene where you see another character that has that thing on its leg and then it explodes. Just to show you what's going to happen to you if you're not careful. That would be really impactful, and it would give you that sense of urgency that you need to get that thing off your leg.
Are you ready, Tenno? Facing Var as the
what do you think about the AI on the Dakata Fortress? And my thoughts on AI in general is pretty general across the board. Like, AI in general just needs a bit more of a push. I think some of the more recent AI they did for some of the more recent model enemies is okay. But the like general infantry units and general NPCs that you've come up against aren't exactly that clever. And there's no, like, in most cases, you're not so much getting a sense of threat from them as you are just a sense of how much am I going to be able to put bullets into them before they die. So let's have a little look at the characters as well. I think all of the frames that you initially get in the very start of the game, or the ones that you're encouraged to build especially, they're all really good for helping learn the game from its fundamental premise of being a ninja and being the ability-based game that it is. And I like to think that most of the characters from a base point of abilities and fundamental characteristics None of them are overtly complicated, and I love that, because it means that the player will get an ease of understanding as to each frame they're making. And it really makes the player feel like they're learning something simple, rather than shoving too much down a player's throat that'll just confuse them. Like, they could have made this bit so much worse by having it so that the frames had, I don't know, 6 abilities, and each one you had to charge, or like they made each frame simplistic enough to be able to be enjoyable, whilst also getting satisfaction in how all the abilities looked and the aesthetic of them. I think that's one of the really big seller points, is just the frames in general. They are all so unique. No frame in the game right now feels too identical or too similar to another. There are some that have like similar traits here and there, or similar abilities that have similar roles, but every frame has its use, and that's something they really emphasize through the tutorial, through the first few missions, and it's something you see in team play especially, is that every frame will have its role. And you almost get like whenever you find a player that's got a frame that you don't have, it's almost like a teaser towards that frame and you wanting to get that frame. Like, you'll go into a mission with a Nova, for example, for the first time, and you'll be like, oh boy, that frame looks amazing. I really want to play that frame. Where did you get it from? And then obviously they probably won't tell you, but you'll have like something that you really want to aim for at that point. And that's the end of the Vor's prize. So the Vor fight, we sort of rushed through it, but it's a really good first quote-unquote boss fight, because they gave the boss immunity frames where he's unkillable or undamageable. You get this whole sense of bigness and damage from him, and how he's actually quite dangerous. And I think that would have worked really well in that very first mission where you fight him, where he's like blasting his laser at you and he destroys your ship. If they'd had that sort of a fight at that stage where you have that sense of potential death coming at you, I think it would have been a bit more immersive at that stage. But, you know, Vor as a first bad guy that you come up against, I think is really well thought out. He's obviously a bad guy, you know you hate him, and he's trying to kill you. It gives you incentive, gives you motive, it gives you a reason to continue. And I think it works wonderfully. I think that's a really well thought out arc for a first mission type in this game. But that is the beginning of Warframe. If you have any ideas yourself, any things you really like or hate about the beginning, please leave a comment in the description of this video on YouTube. Leave a like and a subscribe. And if you want to see more of this content, we are doing this on our Twitch channel, which will also be in the description of this video, near enough every day or so. So if you want to come and join us, check us out. It'd be great to have you there. We do giveaways. We have our own glyph. We are a partnered Warframe streamer, and it only misses you being there to make that worthwhile being. So if you enjoyed it, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Enjoy yourselves. Have a great afternoon, and stay dapper, my dudes.